Hi everybody, my name is Maggie. I'm really excited that you're taking this class. I am a henna artist in the Des Moines area. I have been doing henna for about 7 years professionally. And when I say professionally, I mean I've just been selling it, I guess, for about 7 years. I have done farmers markets, music festivals, private parties. I've done really anything you can think of, state fairs, do those as well. And throughout my experience doing henna, I've learned a lot. When I first started doing henna, I mean, it wasn't that long ago, but Instagram wasn't a super big thing yet. So there wasn't as many like resources, I would say, out there. It took me a long time to kind of get my bearings, learn how to do it. And today I want to share with you how I learned how to do it, things that have helped me, and a lot of information that I wish I would have known when I started. I think the biggest thing with henna is that it's not that it's easy to mess up, but there are a lot of factors in it that you kind of have to get right, especially with the paste, to make it work. And it's a lot of trial and error if you don't know what you're doing, and it can be frustrating. And you have to just keep going. But today I want to share with you all my secrets on everything, how I do everything. And I just want you to kind of learn from me. And at the end of the class, if you find yourself thinking there's things that you wish I would have gone over and I didn't, feel free to reach out to me. I really do want to help you learn how to do it. I think it's such a beautiful art form. And I do think it is something everybody can do. So if you want to know more, you have further questions, just send me a message. I put my email and my Instagram and my Facebook in the packet. So feel free to reach out if you have any questions. You can also see in the packet that it's kind of structured in a way that I'm going to talk about like the history of henna, because I think that's important to learn, where it came from, the beginning of it, where it stems from, especially when you're doing an artwork that isn't necessarily a part of your culture. I think it's really important to understand where it came from and understand why it's used, the traditions behind it, things like that. So I put some of that in the packet, but I'm also going to talk about it in the video. And then we'll talk about henna paste. I don't know the exact order that's in the packet, but I'm going to go off of memory. So henna paste and powder, probably powder first because you need the powder to make the paste. And then henna cones, that's how I apply the henna. And then different design methods and kind of designs to practice how to do it. And that doesn't sound like a lot, but I think it's going to take up some time. I wish we could have done this in person, but because of the circumstances, we all know that that's not an option. So I hope that this video, even though I'm not really a good video person, teaches you what you need to know. Okay, so we're going to start with the history of henna, and this is something that I wish I would have been more interested in the beginning, just to be transparent. As I've gotten more into henna, I've realized the importance of really learning where it came from and different things about it. And I just put a snippet of it in the packet. So if you want to learn more, I really encourage that. There's a lot of documents online, even like YouTube videos of people talking about it, where it came from, the history. And I think those are interesting because henna is so wide. And a lot of people think of it as just one thing that you do for Indian weddings, but it is a lot more than that. And it's just one of those things that you don't know unless you learn it. So I would encourage you to seek out more information. There are places on Facebook called Henna Hub, and that's a place on Facebook, obviously. That's like a forum for henna artists, which is really nice. I use that a lot. It's really good for information. Lots of different henna artists on there talking about showing designs, talking about different techniques, all of that. There's so many different things that you can do, and that's really a good place to learn. But as I said prior, henna is a thing that we would normally associate with the Indian culture, which it's very heavily used in the Indian traditions. They use it. It's called mendi as well as henna, but traditional bridal mendi. So they use it in weddings. And that I think is somewhere that people really associate it with. But they do fingertips all the way up to the elbows on both sides of the arms, and then your toes all the way up to your knees for a traditional Indian wedding. And those designs are different than designs that come from Pakistan. So with traditional bridal mendi, there's a lot of different symbols that can be used in that henna, such as like peacocks are a symbol of good luck. They will sometimes hide the husband's name inside of the henna and have him try and find it. And if he finds it, that means it's good luck. And they also have a thing where they say, and I don't know if it's necessarily like superstition, but it's because it doesn't necessarily really affect you in real life. I don't think in their idea of it. It's more of like, this is what we've always said, so this is what we do. But they say the darker the henna gets on the bride and the longer it lasts, like the better life they'll have together, which I've always thought was really interesting. But just because henna is associated with India, it doesn't mean it's just from India. Pakistan is a really big country that uses henna a lot, and they have a different style than India. So if you research like Pakistani henna, you'll see the difference between the two. And that's something too that I don't think a lot of people realize about henna is there's a lot of different styles. So we have like Western style here in the United States where like me, I do more of a Western style where sometimes I'll do like a sun or a moon or like realistic flowers. You know, those are not necessarily things that have been used in the past with Mendi, but we've kind of adapted it because we see it as more of a temporary tattoo here in the United States. So it has a lot of the times less symbology here than it does in like India or Pakistan or in Africa. They use it a lot in Africa. It's been used for so long. There are a lot of accounts saying it's over like 9,000 years old, which is, it makes sense because henna is a plant, which also I don't think a lot of people know. Henna is like a tea plant. So they take that plant, they grind it up really thin and it creates a powder. And henna grows in like warmer climates. So that's why they've used it and utilized it as a tool. They even have used it for sunscreen because if you don't like put oil in the henna, the essential oils, it won't create a reaction to where it will stain the skin. So it will be more of like a sunscreen. And I always thought that was really interesting. And that's kind of something that applies to henna here in the United States is that henna does better in warmer weather. And so in the summer, henna can stain really dark. And in the winter, you kind of have to try a lot harder to get it to stain dark because there's a lot of factors that go into it. But it is just something kind of interesting. You can see too in history a lot of art where the people are decorated with henna in the art. And that's kind of interesting too because you can see the different changes of designs throughout these centuries and how like maybe they used to do more geometric designs and then as time progressed it's been more flowers and things that have popped up. And it's just interesting to see how it can correlate with like art history, all of those things. So the history of henna is a lot, but that's just kind of a brief overview. Is that it kind of depends who you ask, where they're from, where it originated, but majority of the people believe in like India, Pakistan, Africa, in that region, just because of the humidity, the art we've seen in the past, all of those things, and the traditions that go with it, which is like bridal mendis. They do it a lot for Eid, holidays, just like big life celebrations to, you know, remember, kind of celebrate more, which is nice. So as I stated before as well, henna powder is really important for henna because you can't do henna without the powder. And this is something when I started doing henna that was kind of difficult for me to figure out because there are a lot of different kinds of henna powder and also henna, but henna powder because the paste comes from the powder. So there's a lot of different kinds, and there's a lot of henna artists who create different blends as well. And it's just hard to know what to get right away if you've never done it before. So in the packet, I wrote down a few henna artists where you can get powder from and like blends that you can, they will blend them for you, send them to you, all of that. But for me personally, I use Jamila henna and Rajasthani henna. And I'll show you. Jamila comes like this. Jamila always comes in a box, and this is just straight Jamila, so there's nothing else in it. Jamila tends to be a little bit darker in color than Rajasthani. It really depends on the crop, how long you've had it, all of those things. I'm trying to get some on my fingers so I can show you kind of. So the color is a little bit like that, which beautiful, a little bit like green tea. Everybody is like, is it edible? Which it might be, but I've never tried it. The things with henna powder are, depending on the powder and what you're using, creates a different paste as far as like consistency goes. So if you're using pure Jamila, this is more of a creamy paste, right? So when you practice with your cone, you're going to be able to tell the difference between like creamy, because you can like drop a line, put it over, and it might have some breaks in it because creamy tends to be a little bit thicker. Rajasthani henna, which normally comes in packets like this, is stringier, right? So it just is really preference, and that's why practicing with your henna is going to be beneficial for you, because it is all about practice and personal preference. I used to do just Jamila, and then I met a henna artist that was like, you should try to use like a mix because it'll give you a better consistency in your paste. It'll be easier to work with. So then I started mixing the two of them half and half, and I got a paste I really liked. I put in the packet the recipe that I use, and I'm going to explain it more because some of the things in the recipe I think really need to be talked through and shown. But if you have questions over paste and you get a little nervous about mixing them yourself, I would recommend just buying a blend from a henna artist, probably one of the ones I put in the packet, and it will just be easier for you. You won't have to worry about the measurements. But if you're going to get to a point where you want to start selling henna and you're going to be using it in bulk, I would recommend probably finding a blend that works for you out of like raw materials. So like just buying the Jamila, just buying the Rajasthani, so that you can buy in bulk. When you buy blends from henna artists, they tend to be more expensive because they have to put the work into it and blend it and sift it and all of that. So if you get to a point where you want to sell it and you feel like you have a lot of volume as far as henna and what you produce, then I would recommend finding a blend. But if you're just going to do it for fun and for your friends, I would say just buy the blends, kind of start there. It'll be easier. You can buy it in packets up to 1 kilo. So I think that would get you where you need to be. Another thing with henna powder that's kind of important, and it's so interesting with henna because it is perishable. So a lot of people see henna at like Walmart or an Indian grocery store just sitting out on the shelf, but that's not good henna. It has chemicals in it because henna is perishable. So you can't have something sitting out for months and months and months and expect it to stay good. With henna, it has to be refrigerated or frozen or made fresh, or it won't stain your skin. Same with powder. So you need to check. And normally when you buy henna powder, the henna artist will put on the website what year the crop was. And henna artists who are reputable will not sell you bad henna because it would look bad on them. So I would trust everybody. But if you go to like an Indian grocery store or something, and sometimes they sell Jamila, there's like expiration dates on the back that say the crop year and the expiration date. But I'd really pay attention to that, because if you get something that's like 4 years old, it's not going to stain. You're going to wonder why, because the paste is going to be weird and not work, and you're going to be frustrated. So paying attention to the expiration dates and when the powder needs to be used by will be helpful to you in the future. So now that we know what henna powder is, I am going to show you how to make henna paste. And this is the hardest part of henna, which I used to get really frustrated because I would have these designs that I loved, right? And I was doing markets and everything, and then my henna paste wouldn't stain, and I was so embarrassed and I couldn't believe it. But I had done everything I thought I needed to do, like brewing hibiscus flowers and water and all of these things and lemon juice and blah, blah, blah. And then when I got to the nitty gritty of it and I started just asking people, I realized that I was just doing too much, and there was no reason that I needed to do all of this to get good paste. A lot of the times we like to make things fancier than they need to be. And with traditional henna, it really should just be the henna powder, high quality henna powder, sugar, water, and essential oil. And I would say the powder and the oils are the most important part. With sugar, it doesn't matter what you use. You can use organic sugar, you can use just regular whatever sugar. It doesn't super matter. But the oil needs to be body safe. That's the most important part. But I also have found that you can't really skimp on the oil because it's going to be super, you need good quality to make something of quality. So I like to buy the Oracacia brand. I don't know if you can see it. It's clear. This I just buy from Campbell's. This bottle is huge when it comes to essential oil, but I use this a lot. This is a 16-ounce bottle. They also come though in this size. This one is 4 ounces and this is 16 ounces. So quite a difference, but you can use eucalyptus or you can use lavender. This bottle of lavender was $62 and this bottle of eucalyptus was like $97. Eucalyptus is a lot less expensive than lavender, but this is also a thing where you kind of have to see the clientele, what you're doing to determine what kind of oil you're going to use. Because if you're doing like a belly blessing, the skin is so tight and so sensitive that you're going to want to use a softer oil like lavender. But I typically, if I'm not doing a belly blessing, I really only ever do eucalyptus because of the cost, and it is a bit of a stronger oil, so I feel like it generally stains people better, but that might just be in my head because I know a lot of henna artists that just solely use lavender, but I feel like I do too much henna to spend the amount of money that lavender costs, especially when you're using a lot of oil, which you'll see when I show you how to mix it. But before I show you how to mix it, a few things about henna paste. So it's not like you mix it and it's done. That's a thing that some people are not patient, but I will show you that I did mix some henna prior and it's like this. You have to wait. I wait like 8 hours generally for my henna to develop in a way, because if you mix it right away, it's not going to stain. It needs to go through the process where the oil and the powder have this reaction with each other, and that's what sparks it to stain your skin. But it takes a minute. So if you mix it and just apply it to your skin right away, it's not going to stain. So you mix the paste and then you let it sit covered. I just use these bags, just like old grocery sacks, because I just reuse them. And I put it in my microwave for like 8 hours. You can watch it. Sometimes it's less. If you're in a super big hurry, like 4 to 6, but I just like to make sure it's like extra done. So I do about 8 hours. I do it right before I go to bed so that I don't have to worry. I just wake up in the morning, finish it off, and then it's done. With paste though, it is really perishable. So you have to keep it like this, mix it, and I'll show you how to do that. And then once you cone it, and if you decide not to cone it right away and just keep it in your bag, you want to at least keep it in the fridge. You don't want to keep it out in the warm air and like in the sun, because the henna and the oil are going to separate and you're going to get an oily mess and it's not good. And it's very hard to apply the henna once the oil has separated, because you'll have like a line of henna and then you have like a spill out of oil. And that's hard to work with and it looks messy. And I have done it so many times on accident and it never stains quite as well. So if you follow the directions I'm going to show you, you should be good. But it also is one of those things where if you mess up, that's okay. You can always make new paste, figure something else out. I feel like in order to learn, you kind of have to make mistakes. But yeah, once the cones are there, you can freeze henna. You can freeze henna for up to like 3 months, I would say. Anything past that is it will work kinda, but it's not gonna super work. One thing too that I wish I would have known that I didn't know, which I'm kind of skipping ahead, but only a little bit, is to show you how to test if your henna is actually good or not. So, okay, at this point, this is like the henna that I have already mixed. Just because I'm going to switch camera angles and it's going to be confusing. To just test if your henna is good, and this is a way that you can tell if your paste is ready to like move forward to the next step, is you just take whatever you're mixing or whatever and you just put a little bit on your palm, just a tiny bit on your palm. Wait a few minutes, and if once you wipe it off, it's bright orange, that means it's gonna work. If you mix your paste, you put it on your palm, and you do this, and you take it off, and it's not orange, it's not ready yet. It's not gonna stain yet. So that's just a good rule of thumb. But now I'm gonna switch the camera angle, and I'm gonna show you how I mix my henna paste. Okay, so now we're to the point where we're gonna mix our henna paste. What you need is a bowl. I like to use a glass bowl because they don't stain, but if you're using a bowl that can potentially stain, something plastic, just use something you don't love because it will ruin it. Your oil, so I have my eucalyptus oil, sugar, your powders, and water, and then some sort, you can use saran wrap, wax paper, but I just use these heavy bags just to reuse, recycle. Okay, so this kind of makes a big batch, so feel free to cut it down if you'd like. To start, I always start with my paste, my powders, pardon. So I take 1/4 cup, and this can be really rough measuring because sometimes I spill some in the bowl, but this is my Rajasthani, so I do about 1/4 cup, see, very roughly, 1/4 cup of that. And then I take my Jamila, and sometimes I'm like at the end of a pouch and I don't want to open a new one, so I use what I have, but roughly. So you have, oh, see, not great at measuring, which is fine. And that looks okay because I spilled some in the bowl. So 1/4 and 1/4. And then you're gonna have, so at this point, your powders are in the bowl. So I like to just kind of do a quick mix. And then I like to do all of the dry ingredients first. So now at this point, this is where it can get kind of tricky because you have the sugar, which depends on the weather. So for summertime, you don't need as much sugar as you would in the winter because it helps the paste stick to the skin. But when it's humid outside, the paste sticks pretty well to the skin, so you don't need as much sugar. In the winter, though, you want to add more sugar because the paste can be dry, can dry out kind of, and if the more sugar you add to it, the more it's going to stick to the skin. So in the summertime, I'm going to add about 7 teaspoons of sugar. In the winter, I would recommend using, I don't know, I would say 10 or 12. So we're going to start using 7, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. So now that looks good to me, roughly. And then I like to mix it up more because I don't want clumps of just sugar. I want it to be incorporated. Okay, so now we're done with our sugar. We're going to start with our wet ingredients, which I like to start with oil. I always do water last because you're never quite sure how much you need. The way you do the water is you really eyeball it. So with the oil, I'm going to do 6 teaspoons. You don't want to add too much oil because you don't want it to be an oily paste, but you also want to add enough to where there will be a reaction of some sort. Okay, so at this point we have our oil, our sugar, and our powders. And then to kind of help this go around, we're going to add water. I just add a little bit of water at a time. It's easier to add more than to take out because then that's when you have to start adding more paste or more powder. So I like to just add a little bit of water, kind of massage it in, and see it's not where I need it to be, so I'm going to keep adding more water. More water. And at this stage in the process, you do not want a super like silky smooth paste because you're going to add more water after it's developed. So at this point, you just want it to be like an kind of not creamy, but not as separated as that. You want everything to be combined, but you don't want it to be ready to like apply to the skin because the sugar will work its way into the paste. And if you add all of the water you need right now, when the sugar develops with the paste, it's going to be runnier. So you want to add just enough water to where everything is incorporated. I would say maybe an eighth of a cup, maybe. But that's like a thing too that you can add a little bit. It's hard to measure because it really just depends on the paste itself and the powder that you're using. So just doing a little bit at a time is what I recommend. So as you can see, everything is combined together now. It doesn't look like sandy and there's no parts that aren't incorporated. So this looks good to me. So I like to scoop everything away from the sides, kind of into the well of the bowl. And I just stick my spoon in it. I take my bag and I set it down into it. I don't like hit it very hard to where the henna comes up on the sides. I just press it down to where it's covering it slightly. Okay, so at this point you would take this, put it in the microwave, wait for it to develop like 4 to 8 hours. 4 on the low side, 8 hours to be safe. Okay, so now we've taken it out of the microwave. I made a paste earlier because I didn't want to do the whole waiting game where I come back and I'm like, okay, here we go. So this is what the paste looks like after it's developed. I'm going to show you the difference between the two because there is a color difference. So this is the paste that we just made, and this is the paste that has been developed. You can tell when they're side by side the difference in color. So this one's ready to go. This one needs to sit some. But you can kind of tell with the color difference. Okay, so with this one, when I start, this is the point where we're going to get the henna ready to use. So I like to kind of just mix this around to start, pull things down from the side. So at this point, just mixing it, kind of seeing what it looks like. This is too thick though to use, so I like to just add a little bit of water and mix some more. This is kind of, you have to be patient too because it's hard sometimes to incorporate the water into the paste. You kind of have to really work it. It doesn't seem like it's going to, but eventually they kind of homogenize together and you'll get something pretty and silky and smooth. So starting to look more like what we want, but it's still too thick for my liking. Add a little more water. Stir. This can be kind of messy too sometimes because it is hard to incorporate the water into the paste. So I like to mix. Not a pretty noise either, but so the way that I like to test if it's getting good or not is like to take a spoonful and see how it falls into it. This for me, you want it to come off the spoon and kind of leave a trail. See how it's falling nicely and it looks creamy? There's like, you can pull it and it comes up like that. At this point, you could use this. I'm gonna add a little bit more water. Might have been too much. If you add too much, you could always just take it, pour it back in to the jar before you mix it. Okay, let's see. At this point, beautiful. So when I take a spoonful, it's falling off the spoon nicely. if you can see how it just goes down. Okay, so this is good, a good consistency. This is something that will probably need to be practiced though, because this is about personal preference. I like it a little bit on the thicker side. Some people like it really runny. Okay, so that is the finished paste. I'm gonna show you now though, we're not done yet. At this point, you're gonna want some kind of jar or glass that you can put a pastry bag inside of. And just put the pastry bag down inside, and I kind of loop it over the edges. Open it up, and this is where it gets kind of, people think this is so odd, but it does make a big difference on your paste, is to take like a knee-high nylon and stick it in the jar, and then put it around too, and kind of push it down. Okay, so the reason for this is we're going to strain the henna. People who don't strain the henna will see a lot of clumps in their paste. So you know how we had to let the henna sit off to the side for a few hours? It kind of can dry it out, and there can be dry parts, dry clumps in your paste. Like, I don't know if you can see in this, but like right there, that's a clump, and that will clog your cone. So we want to get rid of those. So I scrape down everything, all of the henna in the bowl, and I just pour it into the nylon, into the pastry bag. I mean, you don't have to get everything. I just like to get as much as I can. Okay. So at this point, you're going to take the nylon, pull it up. I like to kind of get all, so this is all henna, but see how we have, this is all henna. I like to kind of go like this to get it down towards the bottom. And then I take the pastry bag. You can see. Okay, and then I grip, and I have this in one hand, this in the other, and I just pull. And the henna starts to come through the nylon. And you can kind of squeeze down on the nylon too to get your henna out. So you just keep squeezing as much as you can, and then it pulls out. So now we have the nylon, and we have our henna paste. So this is our henna bag. You can cut this down too, but this makes it easier to fill henna cones. So I'm gonna I like to take the top, kind of go like this. To close it, I want it to be kind of taut, you know? You can trim the top of it so that you don't have all this excess. Now we have this. I just put a quick rubber band around the top of it, and you have your henna paste. Next, I'm going to show you how to roll a henna cone and how to fill it. At this point, we're going to start to roll henna cones. What you need to roll a henna cone is a piece of mylar or cellophane. I like to use cellophane because it's not as thick, and I don't know, just preference. You can get these at Michael's or Amazon, whatever you like. You're going to get like a 9x9 square. And then you also need a pair of scissors, some needles, and some tape. You're going to cut your cellophane right down the middle. This doesn't matter if this cut is super nice or not, because it's going to be the top of the cone, so you won't even see it when we're done at the end. Okay, so now we have what we're going to use to create our cone. So you're going to use both of your hands. You have these two fingers and this third finger. These are the ones that are going to be doing most of the work. So to create the shape of the cone, you're going to put your two fingers inside of the flap, and you're going to roll it around. Okay, so now your two fingers are inside. you're gonna hold this side down with your hands and you're gonna use your fingers to like slide in because you want to create a cone shape. So you're gonna pull, pull, pull to where we now have a cone shape. You're gonna grab this side, you're gonna bring it over. And see right now it's wrinkly. So you can, with your thumb, pull up and with this hand, pull down, and that'll get rid of the wrinkles. And you always are kind of in a pulling up motion with your thumb. And now you grab this again. Okay, so now we have created our cone. And at this point, my fingers are stuck inside. I feel that it's kind of wrinkly. So I'm going to grab the tip and I'm gonna pull out. But now you can see we have the cone shape. I'm gonna put my fingers inside, kind of roll, 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 smooth that out a bit, pull up. Okay, so now the reason for the needle, which a lot of people don't know about, is it just creates like a tip that is even and it makes your lines even. So you just can pull the needle out when you're ready to do the henna paint, like when you're ready to do your designs, and you'll have a nice line. So you want to roll your cone around a needle. So these needles I just got from Michael's, but you kind of, to get the needle inside of it, you want to push forward to where you have an opening in the cone and you're just gonna slide the needle inside. Once the needle is inside, you're gonna pull up to where sometimes I'm really bad at putting the needles in and I don't know why, which is okay, but because there's so many layers, you wanna get it in the middle layer. So your needle might fall out a few times, which is fine. You're gonna then, once the needle's in, you're gonna pull up, because you want the needle to be taut inside. So now we just have this. So we're gonna take some pieces of tape. I like to use clear tape, but that's a preference. You're gonna put it on the edge to start, kind of press it down, and then we're gonna roll around the cone. Roll around the cone. Pull the fingers out. So now we have a cone. I like to have more tape than needed. So I put one on the tip, but then I look towards the tip right here and I can see that there's a crease. So I put another piece of tape just so it doesn't come undone. And I just roll, 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 roll. And now you have your cone. So cones are something that I like to use. Some people use bottles. There's a lot of different options when it comes to how to apply henna. That's the thing that I would practice as well, though, because just because it works for me doesn't mean it'll work for everybody. But I would say a cone is the best way to get like curves and all of that. And if you're really interested in like geometric, bottles are sometimes great. You can find those on henna websites and kind of test out what you like. So that's totally up to you. But now that we have our cone, we are going to fill it. So I have the paste that we made earlier. I have a paper towel just because sometimes it can get kind of messy. And I have our cone and I have more pieces of tape. So first part is opening this bag. You want to just cut the tip of it, not a ton. You can always cut more, but you don't want it to be super open because you're going to have issues filling your cone. Okay, then you take your cone. You want to pull the needle out because you want to be able to get all of the air out of it. We're going to reinsert the needle though. So you have your pastry bag with your henna. You have your cone. You're going to stick the pastry bag in the cone and you're just going to fill it. I like to just press down. Sometimes I take a look. I press more. Press more. You don't want to overfill your cones. It's really easy to overfill your cones. One thing you can do is kind of like shake the cone a little bit and see where the henna is at. And you can feel how much empty space is in the cone, right? So I have quite a bit. So I'm going to add a little bit more paste. This is the thing too, though, that honestly filling your cones is practice. You're going to learn. It takes a minute though to kind of see like how big you like your cones, how small you like your cones. Totally up to you. So at this point, my henna is in the cone and now I need to seal it. So I'm going to grab the top. I want to push down the henna paste want to push it down. Okay, you can feel too when it's totally pushed down, because you'll be able to feel like the tension. So at this point, when it's all pushed down, you can see paste kind of coming out the end of it. You want to reinsert your needle into the hole. That kind of creates a plug so that the henna doesn't leak out when you like totally seal your cone, because it's easy with all of the pressure you're going to be applying to it to have it all leak out and go everywhere. So I always do the needle. So, okay, now at this point, we have our needle in our cone. It's pushed all the way down. We just need to seal the top. So I like to lay it down on a flat surface. I take my finger, I kind of press it down more. And if this part makes you uncomfortable, you can always twist it like we did with the pastry bag and use a rubber band. But I like to fold it. It is just easier for me. I like the flat top, but it's up to you. So I'm pressing it down. I take one side and I kind of fold it over. Okay. And then I take the other side and I fold it over as I tuck the other side into it, kind of. So now I have created this. And now I just have this little tail. So with this tail, I grab it, I fold it once, and at the same time I'm pushing. I fold it again as I'm pushing. So now at this point, we have this, and then you take the end of it, and you push down, and you fold it. And then you take your tape, put one piece of tape on top, one piece of tape across the side, and now you have your henna cone. I'm going to fill one more because I feel like sealing the cones is always kind of confusing. Some people weigh their cones too, just to make sure they have the same amount every time. When I sell mine, I do that, but when I'm doing it for myself, I don't normally. So you take your cone, pastry bag, stick it in, start to kind of twirl just to fill as much space as you can. Kind of keep an eye on it. It's kind of to the level that I like. So my needle is out of it. So I'm going to push down. Push down. So I have filled the cone. And now I'm going to put the needle back in it. So the needle is in it now. And the henna is all the way through the cone. So I'm going to lay it down, have my finger, push down one more time, take the side, fold it, take the other side, and I'm going to fold it. And then I'm going to push down. And then I'm going to kind of grab the sides and kind of pinch them in. So now I just have the tail. So I'm going to fold the tail once. I'm going to fold the tail twice. And then now I have that flat part again. And I'm going to squeeze, tuck it, and close it. This took me a really long time to learn, so don't get discouraged if it takes you a minute. It seriously took me probably 2 years. Not even kidding. For so long. Something I used to do was just use rubber bands on the top because it was easier, but at the end of the day, learning how to do it right is going to make it easier for you. So now you have henna cones, which are nice and beautiful. When you want to use them, you just pull out the tip of it, put the tip back in when you don't want to use it, and that's how you do a henna cone. Which, if once you get this down, you're golden. You just have to practice your designs. But this, I think, is the hardest part about henna. And now that we have these, I'm going to show you how to do some design. Okay, so I'm back at a different angle, but I showed you how to make the paste, how to roll the cones. These are kind of difficult things, so if you have questions, really feel free to reach out to me. I would love to help you. We have our really beautiful henna cones that we're going to use now to do some designs, but something I wanted to talk about is how to prep the skin, how to do all of that. So henna stains really well when the skin is not super moisturized at first. So henna has to penetrate into the skin, right? So it stains the skin. So it has to go down to the skin's layers. So you don't want someone to be like heavily moisturized, because that oil is going to create a barrier on the skin, and it's not going to be easy for the henna to like get through that, so you won't get a good stain. So if you're hennaing yourself or someone else, I would either use like an alcohol pad, wipe off the skin, or like a wet towel, wipe off the skin, but make sure it's fully dry. Once you have the skin prepped is when you can start doing the henna. Making sure that your henna can stain, like the palm trick I showed you earlier, that's important before you do henna, just to make sure that it's going to show up. What else about henna? Staining skin. There's so many things, but it really is trial and error. Those are my best advice tips I would give to someone, is just to make sure the skin is good, because I used to do it in the summer when people were sweaty and I wouldn't wipe off the sweat, and then they'd come back and be like, why didn't it stain? And I was like, oh, I have no idea, but it's because I didn't clean their skin. So cleaning the skin, big deal. Yeah, and this is going to be one of the last parts of the video, is the designs. When I first started doing henna, which is what I'm relating everything back to, but I just think of what I did in like my henna journey, I didn't have a ton of like original ideas at first. I do think that if you're an artist, you might have more ideas come to you, but I don't think you have to be an artist to do henna. When I started, I would find pictures on Google of henna that I liked, and then I would just copy them. And as you go along, you start to gain ideas, and you see patterns and like repetition and all of that you can do. And then you just start to create your own style of things that you've liked. You merge different things together. So I have put in the book some step-by-steps of some designs, and then a couple from my Instagram that I think might be kind of easy to follow. But something that is interesting with henna, and I don't know if it's just my brain, but breaking the design down into different elements. So you can see that in the book of how, like the flower, I start with the circle, and then the bumps, and then the petals, and then the shading. So you can see that if you break it down, the designs down, you're going to have an easier time building, because you're not going to be so overwhelmed with like, how do I do that and that and that and that. You just have to start with like the center, work your way out. It will be easy at first. Try to find designs that are easier for you. You'll see in the kit that you're going to get, there's going to be a cone that looks like this, and there's going to be a cone that is sealed with a rubber band. The rubber band one is going to be full of lotion. That's a really good way to practice, because it kind of will have the same consistency as henna, but you can obviously take it off and it's not going to stain your skin, which is nice. You can also practice on cardboard or like acrylic or anything like that. I personally really just like to practice on skin, because you're going to have like the curves of it. It's going to be bumpy. You're going to run into some things. And that's like, if you practice on flat surfaces all the time, you're not going to quite know how to adapt to like the body. So I would practice on like your hands. If you can do like your thigh, if you have too much on your hands and you don't want people to see, you can do your calf. Really anything on your body, you're the best surface to practice, because you have patience with yourself, and just do things you like. If you do designs that you like, I think you're more willing to spend time on it, and practice on your friends, on your family, and just practice. I feel like people see me now and think that I've always done henna like this, which is not true. I just was determined to learn how to do it. I just wanted a hobby that I could potentially be good at, and it just kind of happened. But there was years before I started doing markets that I was doing henna like every week on myself, on my friends, just to learn. I wanted to learn it so bad. And you kind of have to have, I don't want to say that drive, because it's just art, but like you have to have patience with yourself, and you have to have the willingness to learn it and be disappointed at times, and you're going to get better. I would say the first 3 months was rough for me because of learning how to like hold the cone, how to take care of it, all of these things. But I'm hoping that the knowledge I've shared with you today will be enough to where you'll know what to do. So I'm going to switch the angle and show you kind of how I do a flower design and how I hold my henna cone and all of those things. And that will be the end of this class. But I hope that you reach out to me. I would love to see some designs that you guys have made with these cones and what you've learned from this class. I'm hoping in the future we can do this in person, because then I can answer your questions face to face. We can help each other face to face, and it will be nice. So thank you so much for taking this class. It means a lot to me, and I hope you guys had fun. Okay, so for this part, I'm going to show you how to do a simple flower. I'm going to practice on my own hand, so it might look kind of odd, but to start with the henna, you'll see that it starts to come out of the tip. I like to kind of grab a little bit just to make sure that it's going to start to flow. So I'll press the tip and then I'll get some on my finger. Having a paper towel handy will be nice because you might have to wipe off some stuff, but I just wipe it in between my fingers. I feel like that's kind of part of being a henna artist, is that you're covered in henna all the time. So to start a flower, I like to start with a circle. So if your henna cone is really full, henna paste will just start to come out. So I just squeeze a little bit of it out until I can start to have my own control of when it comes out. I hold it exactly as I hold a pencil. And part of henna is how you hold your cone and how the pressure that you apply. So I hold it like a pencil. And when I squeeze, let's see, I'll show you on my fingers. I squeeze it at the top between my thumb and this finger, and then I guide it with the bottom fingers as I squeeze. That's the thing though, that some people squeeze towards the bottom. I just feel like I've always done it as I squeeze down. So that's how I apply the pressure to my cone. To start with the flower, I just do a simple circle. And these don't have to be perfect. You'll be surprised that you can kind of fix the circles if they're not perfect by doing like multiple layers. So I start with a circle. And then I start with the humps, where I start down, I go up and down, up and down. And these are elements that you can just practice by themselves. Sometimes just for my own, like, I don't know, it's like a preference, I guess. I do that and then I come to the bottom and I start down here and I start doing the same thing. I go up and down until I get around, up and down. And then I start in the middle of the other side, and I just do this until I get it all around the circle of the flower. All the way around it. Okay, so now we have our circle and our humps, as you can see. I don't know what else to call them, so I just call them humps, but okay. Now we're gonna start with our petals. One thing that I like to do, it really depends on the flower, but this is my basic flower. I like to kind of get the center of the circle and I come up and I make a dot. And that's going to be where the tip of my petal goes. So I kind of just eyeball where I start. I go out and then I go up, go out, and then I go up. And see, sometimes you get stuff like that, you can just swipe it away. So now I have that. And to kind of add depth, I like to go in and do like thicker on the top. And then I go the middle of the circle and I go down and I do the exact same thing. So now I have a petal there. And it looks a little wonky up here, but that's okay because we're going to thicken it again. So we're going to go through, add some thickness. Okay, so now we have our top. These are kind of our guides. So now in between these, I'm going to do 3 petals. So I'm going to go from the middle over, make a dot. And I'm going to have these be a little shorter, but that's preference. I go out, up to that point, down. Then I'm going to do the same over here. Just kind of creating the petals and then down. But then I'm going to go back in and add the thickness again to the top of these just to have some consistency throughout the design. Okay. And you can always fix stuff. You can always add more thickness, make the tips a little bit sharper. So now I have that, so I have to do it on the other side. So I have to go middle and make a dot. I do the same. I go out, up. And sometimes the petals are bigger some places, which I feel is kind of okay because it's a flower and it is organic. But if you want to spend a ton of time and get your guides right, feel free. I feel like sometimes in henna you can't even really tell, but totally up to you. See, that one was kind of not my best petal, so I'm going to go back in and fix it a bit. Okay, so now I have my flower. And now it's great, but we want to add a little bit of depth. So this is where I like to add shading. So with a flower, to add shading, I like to take my tip of my henna cone and apply a tiny bit of pressure and drag out. A tiny bit of pressure. And then in the middle, I barely apply any pressure and I just kind of grab from the top of those and pull up. And that kind of creates like a shaded effect. So you're going to do a little bit of pressure and drag up to create like the darker part of the shading. Little bit of pressure. And we're going to drag up with hardly no pressure at all. And if you kind of drag the top of a hump, just replace it. Some more. Drag with no pressure really. Drag. And now we're going to go up with hardly no pressure. Yay, now we have a flower. So at this point, if you want this to stain a really long time, let it sit. Don't mess with it. You want to let henna sit on your skin for about 4 to 6 hours. Once it's on your skin right now, you can tell it's very wet and like glistening. When it starts to dry, you'll be able to tell because it will matte down. To get a dark stain, 4 to 6 hours. Parts of it will probably flick away when it dries. That's okay. Just don't like forcibly take the paste off. Once you have the paste on your skin, it starts to like sink into your skin. After the 4 to 6 hours, when you take the paste off, just flake it away. Don't use water. You want to avoid water to the spot for like 12 hours. I know that that's kind of difficult, but if you can just avoid it for as long as you can, that will be perfect. Henna takes a couple days to oxidize in your skin, so you're going to have to wait a couple days to get it exactly the stain it's going to be. At first, it's bright orange, but it gets darker. You just have to give it a couple days. Putting Vaseline or coconut oil on your henna after the paste is off is really helpful. It keeps it moisturized. As I said prior, when you're cleaning the skin, you don't want it to be super moisturized. But after, you want it to be really moisturized because henna flakes away with your dead skin. So the more moisturized your skin is after the paste is already off of it, the longer it's going to stain. Just not scrubbing it in the shower is another really important part to keep the design lasting longer. You don't really want to exfoliate the area. And just being nice to it. I always tell people it sounds like a lot of directions, but henna really does take care of itself. The most important part is keeping it on your skin for like 4 to 6-ish hours. And if you can do more, fantastic. But that's like the minimum, I would say. Other than that, though, you should be good to go. With your cones, if you're going to use them right away, keep them in the fridge. And if you're not going to use them, I would say keep them in the freezer. They're good in the freezer for about 2 to 3 months. And you can always test if they're good by putting them on your palm and wiping it away. If it's bright orange, it's still good to use. But if you're going to use them within like a week to 2 weeks, I would just keep them in the fridge. But if they're in the freezer, you can thaw them and use them and then refreeze them and all of that. So I hope you guys have learned a lot. Thank you for taking my class.